Guys, this is Fathernetics, the show where queer dads, foster dads, adopted dads, single parents, and everybody holding it together with caffeine and emotional support paralysis and maybe a playlist or two gets real about family. Like accidentally stayed in the Walmart parking lot listening deep. If you've been here before, welcome back. And if you're new here, settle in. You picked a good episode to start with. Dr. Adam Anthony, an ally, joins us for one of the most honest conversations we've had yet about adoption, foster care, identity, Black family dynamics, reunion journeys, and what it feels like to grow up with questions nobody around you knows how to answer. We talk about the foster to adopt journey, race in adoption, genealogy, DNA testing, kinship care, masculinity, and of course, transparency with adoption. There are a lot of emotional realities that we need to contend with biological family for years after we go through this process. There are moments that are hopeful, uncomfortable, funny, and honestly necessary. And somewhere in the middle of all that, we also discuss the possibilities of this man ending up with surprise triplets someday. So there's that too. All right, guys, deep breath. Let's get into it. So first of all, I appreciate you spending the time. I know that we had moved things around a couple of times, but it was very important for us to be able to connect with this audience in kind of giving us what you do. As most of my audience knows, here on Fathernetics, we focus on the energy of being a dad, right? Regardless of where that comes from. A lot of that is more around the knowledge and less so the physical individual, because we have a lot of moms out there that have to fill that role. We have a lot of single parents and grandparents that are filling that role. We have LGBTQ parents that are extending their families through extraordinary means to be able to fill that role as well. So, Dr. Adams, I appreciate you joining me. Can you tell me? I see the doctor part, and I'm curious the engine behind it. What is your doctorate in?
Course, I'm very proud of that. So I have a doctorate in education. I conferred my degree in 2024. So I have EDD is what those in academia know, not a PhD. That's a very clear distinction. I know a lot of people just want to slap a PhD on me, and that's great. I'm
Oh,
doing
that's
something.
what I was doing.
That's not the degree I got. I got an EDD.
Welcome to Fathernetics, Fatherhood Unfiltered. I'm Jamil. Welcome to the podcast.
Do it. You could never find somebody do it like me. I'ma turn it all the way up, cause it kamikaze. Go ahead and try, baby. You are gonna see that you'll never ever find somebody do it like me.
What's the distinction?
So PhD is more research scholarship, and EDD is professional practice.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, that's nice. You know what? I already we're learning things on the show, so I certainly appreciate it. So, by way of a 15-second introduction, tell us about yourself, how cool you are, and why you have such a following.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, I'm Dr. Adam Anthony, and a little bit about me. I'm a Black same race adoptee. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. I have two same race Black parents, but I also have the makeup of being a former foster care youth as well. I built and founded an organization called Empowerment, which works to support young men of color who come from foster care and adoption backgrounds with leadership development, mentorship, and also partnering with organizations, schools, community spaces to make sure that that lived experience is heard, it's seen, it's understood, and also there's better support systems in place for, men like myself who are still boys that need that kind of support, who need to be seen, who need to be, shown that there's a pathway forward beyond whatever their lived experience is, and that their lived experience is not a limitation, but it is a lens and it is information. So that's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm called to do. And I appreciate you just creating a space for me to talk about that.
So, what I will say is, my dad works in he used to work for Children Protective Services in Texas, and now he works for a state agency that kind of works in that same vein. So I've been exposed to a lot of those elements from a younger age. Of course, age appropriate stuff. I was never really, the curtains were never really peeled back to the point where it was like, well, you shouldn't be, So I certainly appreciate that, and I guess that gives me a level of comfort in the steps that I took to have my now 12-year-old son. We adopted him out of the Arizona State adoption system for a foster care system. Wow. When he was 4. So we did foster to adopt with him. So the journey for us was very unique. We talk about it. My husband and I talk about it in episode 2 of Fathernetics. In case anyone listening was interested in going back that far, it seems like forever now. But we've been through. So when I came across your profile, I love talking to individuals who have been on the other side, right? Because as adults, we are in a mode now where we're looking to expand our family. So we're looking at options. Is surrogacy right? Is adoption right? Is IVF right? Is foster to adopt right? And a lot of us don't go all the way down all the paths, right? So we don't know all the little machines and what it takes to get you here. You being someone that's covering now what I would say is 2/3 of the adoption side. Is the fostering side included in that? Right.
Yeah, the
Um,
foster.
right. So it's like you got the 2/3 of it, with the 1/3 being the parent side. I mean, you may end up there one day, or maybe you are already there. But I think it's always special to kind of hear, how do you see things from such a young age in the system? You hear so much negativity. I think there are. I think there's a lot more positivity in it than there is negativity, and I think the negativity comes out of the bureaucracy that's tied to it that you can't avoid. But um, where does your journey start, and how did you? Let's go all the way up to you deciding to start your business, because I think that's intrinsically fantastic.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Um, so actually, I learned this later on. I didn't know this as a kid. I always knew I was adopted as a kid. My mom, my adoptive mother, she adopted me. She was a single mom at the time. And what I was told, what I, was told at that time was that my birth mother, my biological mother, she wasn't in a position to, care for a child. She was a young teenager, and my biological father wasn't in the picture, so he was unknown. Didn't know anything about him. But, I believe, at that time, based off what I learned, she's pressured into doing something that, she didn't see any other alternatives or options for where she could, exist with me together. But my mom, the adoptive mother that I'm talking about, she always was transparent with that information. But the thing that I learned later on in life was that she actually was in a foster to adopt program as well. So I was in foster care initially um, before she met me, and then I was in her foster care for a while, and then she adopted me later on. And then when she adopted me, she actually met my adoptive father after that. And then they had their own biological child after adopting me. So fast forward a little bit. Um, like I said, I've always known I was adopted. I always knew that that was a fact. But the reason why I think it's negative, um, because of the system, sure, but also because of just the things that we didn't know, I didn't know as a kid. Um, there wasn't a lot of language for adoption. And for me, as a same race adoptee, what that meant was most people didn't know I was adopted. Most people saw two black parents and black kids. That's the family. There's no question. There's no curiosity. There's no looking deeper at anything. And so I never really was in a place to really get people to ask more questions about my background or about things that I didn't even know, or have those conversations about the underneath, the deeper part. Because most people just thought I was so and so's kid. I'm so and so's brother. I'm so and so's friend, cousin, whatever. It's like, oh, you happen to be adopted? I didn't know that. And I'm like, well, yeah, I've always been adopted. But it just wasn't something that we talked about on a deeper level. And I think that's also part of the reason why it's negative, for some adoptees in the system, because for me, it was a closed adoption. There wasn't a lot of information about that. There wasn't really anything I can tie to, what was or what is. we just have to live the life now as an adoptee without really knowing. It's like we know that we're adopted, but we don't know what we were adopted from sometimes. We don't know who else we're connected to or what other story or narrative connects us to who we are. All we know is the life that we're living now. All I ever knew as a kid was Adam. Adam, that's so and so's son, living so and so life, and just keep moving forward, right? And
So let
I'm
me ask
not
you
really,
this.
yeah, no, you
Let
can.
me ask you this. Okay, so two questions. At what age range were you adopted at, or in the foster care system, should I say?
So I was in the foster care system as an infant. And
Okay.
then a little over like toddler age, I was adopted by my mom.
Okay. So I hear what you're saying about I think it's fantastic that your mom took the opportunity to say from day one, hey, this is where we're at. I think there's strength in that. That's something that we've done with our son as well. There is no ambiguity there around, any of that. I think the strength there is also he was 4, so he's old enough to know that something changed, right? So
Mhm.
hiding that would have done a disservice. I don't see there's no shame in it, right? And I think hiding it would have introduced that into the equation. So my question is, as an adult, are you able to say what you would have liked to have known that would have been impactful, or is this just really you now taking the opportunity to look back and say, hey, it would be good to know all these missing pieces?
You know, it's both. I think that as an adult, of course, like I said, there's language now that I have for things that I felt, I, experienced, but I couldn't really put a lot of words that made sense, you know, because imagine being a kid who knows that they're adopted and like your son, essentially like they know that something's happened, but the time that it takes to actually develop some cognitive understanding, some emotional understanding, some whatever development that naturally, or I don't say naturally, but does need to happen takes time. If that ever happens, it's not a guarantee. But I know that I needed that time to really see the impact of that experience before I could actually create some language to communicate, now as an adult to my parents, to my biological relatives, to, the community, to anyone who knows me that, yes, the life that I live, the life that I've been able to live, I would not trade that for anything. However, and, comma, I am still grieving for not knowing anything about what I was connected to, who was connected to me, um, what that could have been, even with the facts that I'm aware of. I don't know about your son in those circumstances, but for me, I had a limited backstory. But even with learning more information later on, once I got access to my adoption records, it's like, okay, well, that's clarifying. So I can understand, like, this was, I guess, what they thought was the best situation, but it doesn't replace the emotional, confusion and complexity and nuance of I'm still, in a different position and in a different, identity in a different, environment than what I was born into. And what does that actually mean for me? How can I connect to that if I want to connect to that? And I just want, to your earlier question, create a platform that speaks to that, provides ways to navigate that. So people who are like me, young men like me, can navigate, they can heal their identity, they can find a space to, communicate that, work through that, give voice to that, put a narrative to it that says, you know what? Okay, that actually matters to me. It does. And is there a space to ask any of these questions, talk about any of these concerns, where I can feel safe? And somebody's gonna walk with me on that journey and say, "Yeah, man, like I've been there already. Like I know. We don't have to have the same story for me to not, want to be there for you and say your voice, your story deserves to be heard, and it deserves to, you deserve to figure it out."
Well, because I mean, and you're closer to it than anybody else would ever be. That hasn't gone through that process, regardless of whether your story is the same or not. I think is what you're saying. You're in a better position to say, "I get it,"
Hmm.
which I think is awesome. I don't know that there are a lot of adoptive kids that come of age that take the opportunity to have those introspective conversations to say, hey, maybe I can't get in and find out what the legal records and all that stuff is until I'm over here, but while I'm here, this is how I'm feeling. And who do you share that with, to say, yeah, you're not crazy, that feeling that you're having, that's real. You may be attached to this, to your adopted family, and that's your family for all you know, but you have freckles. Your hair is red. You may be the same race, but there are some nuances that no one will pick up on until you say I'm adopted. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's why you don't look like, you know come on. You didn't know that until I said it.
Yeah. That
We all
reaction, it's that situation. Like it's crazy how many people I've told over time that I'm adopted, and they're like, feel like I knew that, but you never really said much. I'm like, well, again, at the end of the day, if I have less information than you have, what am I going to tell you? Like, think about being a kid. Think about how sometimes cruel kids can be, how confusing life can be. I mean, going from like, early education to primary, all those different stages of development, and you don't really know much. And so saying that to somebody is kind of scary because it's like, well, if they ask more questions, if they want to know, and I don't know what to tell them, what do I look like? Like, how is that going to be like for me when I'm already trying to navigate, fitting in, belonging, getting into sports, good grades, all the other things of being, Adam. Um, there's an additional tax that's required of me to now have to defend or explain, you know, my story and parts of it where I don't even know. That's not that's not like a yes, I'm gonna run into the fire and say that unless I know, which I did not know, someone is actually available to be there for me and say, hey, yeah,
So is it a part of your process to say, here's a space? I guess I'm leaning into you. Tell me your process, but is
mhm,
it here's a space? Come ask some questions. If you want to take a journey, I can show you the first couple of steps you could take. I'll be with you through this journey. Your parents may be there in the background. That's great. They may not know where to start. They may not know where to go. Let me help them, start that process also with you, and then off you go, or let's go together, or check back with me in a couple of years. All of the above. How does that work for you?
yeah, yeah. Um, well, how it really works and what I've been doing is I've been going back and looking at my journey, entirely. From the moment I knew I was adopted to accessing my adoption records to creating empowerment and what I'm doing now. Because the thing that I've been learning is all of that matters more in terms of like my story, my narrative, my testimony to bridging those gaps for kids to understand or feel seen, and also for their parents to understand and be affirmed too. Because I don't think
Hmm.
that adopted kids don't want, I don't, sorry. I know adopted kids who, are adopted families at the end of the day. They want to be seen. They want to be, heard. They want to be cared for. They need all those things that, our parents provide. But also the adopted parents, like if they're really honest, I think that they really want to be affirmed, but they don't want to feel bad or guilty for not knowing certain things that either no one told them, they never knew, or they didn't realize was important. And so my process
Hmm.
is with all the things that I've learned, with all the things that I've been able to do, my journey, the ups and downs, all of that. How do I help, young men navigate this? But also with the trainings and the webinars that I do, how can I help adoptive parents be in a space that feels safe to actually talk about these things? We're here to learn, we're here to learn, we're here to move forward, but you can do that in a way that feels safe for you to engage because you know at the end of the day it's for the betterment of you, but also for your kids.
Did you find when you started your journey of starting to peel back the layers of the onion, right? You really started to want records and things of of that nature. Did you find that easy to do to start that process? Did someone help you say, okay, if you're looking for this, here's where you go to find records A and piece them together? Did you have did you have the pictures on the wall with the string? That's
Mm. Yeah,
that's
no,
what came to
no.
mind.
I know, no, but it's funny that you say that because I did it myself. I did it myself. I've always, my parents raised me to be independent, which I'm very happy about that I have that quality. But also at the same time, the double-edged sword of that is sometimes, hyper independence can create, a tendency to be self-reliant without asking for help from people. Because you don't trust that they're actually going to be able to hold capacity in a way that you need them to hold that capacity or show up in a way that you really need them to show up. And so I went through that journey by myself initially. But then I shared that with them once I learned what I learned. But, fast forward, once I did all the DNA things, I got access to my adoption records, that string and the pictures that you're talking about, I created a hall of fame for my ancestry. Okay. So I know my ancestors and I got them looking at me and I'm looking at them because at the end of the day, that's all I have. Like that's the thing that allows me to connect to, the what was, the what is, or what could have been, and all that kind of stuff. um, but what I would have preferred to do now, looking back, and something that I try to encourage adopted parents in my talks and conversations is you can create a pathway for them that it's not saying that your child is going to immediately come to you and say, hey, okay, I want to do the search. I want to find all this stuff out. Rarely is it just like all at once where they want to know everything. A lot of times it's like small inquiries or curiosities that they have where something pops up randomly and they're like, hmm, I wonder what my birth mom looks like, or I wonder if da 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 da, or blah 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 blah. You can still create that space where they can take as much or as little as they want because they know from you there's safety there. Whatever curiosity, whatever questions, whatever challenges that they have, you are that secure base to provide that safety. You have to provide it. You have to be that because if you don't, then they can go navigate those things legally on their own however they want to do it. In the age of social media and digitalization, it's not that hard to go wandering in. But do you want that, or do you want them to know that you're not going to hold anything back from them and their curiosity and their journey? You're just going to be that anchor to support them with whatever comes their way.
So I like that approach. Um, do you feel like you have learned all that you can from where you are now based on your thirst for knowledge of your lineage today? Have you been able to have you taken a step to say, let me connect with some people that I may have found somewhere, right? Through whatever means.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all those pictures that I'm talking about, that's come from relatives that I've met. That's come from
Okay.
people who are my part of my ancestral lineage who, you know, which is the other part of the thing that's not a guarantee, but we deserve this, we should have this, but it's not a guarantee. Um, if you get the opportunity to be in reunion or meet any kind of biological relatives, the hope is that you can get, we all have our own different wants, sure. But for me, my want was I want to know who you are. I want to know who's who. I want to know who I'm connected to. What does this mean? What is my story? What is your story? Like what makes me the way that I am, and my passion for mentoring and my spiritual faith and my tendency to talk a lot and all these different things. Like, where's that in the family? Like, help me figure all that out. Because I want to be a part of that. And thankfully, I had a few relatives who were able to make space for that. They saw the need, they saw the generosity that they had to give that to me because they understood you're our family. So we're sorry that you didn't have any of this, but here's what we can do. Here's what we can share with you and show you. Um, because sometimes the reality also is that, like for me, my biological parents, which it makes sense. It's not easy. It's not great, but it's harder for them to do those things when I'm the product of them. And for one of them, I was the product of, a decision that they made a long time ago that's now, present. And for lack of a better term, confronting that decision. Um, and then for another parent, my biological father, he never knew I existed. He wasn't in the picture. And it's kind of, it's part of what I would love to talk about, but there's still a lot that I gained
Well,
from that.
so that
Yeah.
was what I was going to ask you. How do you mentally prepare for this exercise, right? Because I think you're helping me understand, right? This is like 7 degrees of separation. You're on your journey to get more information and kind of tie some of the knots together. And by doing that, you're touching all these other people that may or may not be very well receptive to you reaching out to them in the first place. Because now you're ripping away bandages and you're opening up old wounds and um some people have to now explain themselves like, okay, uh, by the way, I mean, it could be those scenarios that we see in the movies all the time, right? This happy family, they've got 5 kids and they've been married for 30 years. And all of a sudden here comes this kid out of
Yeah.
nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Yeah.
how do I explain that? And and you're like, I didn't mean to start all this, but write me a note or something.
Yeah. I'm here. I'm here. Yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot. And it was messy sometimes. It was imperfect, but I never changed as far as my authenticity. Like I was always upfront with, what I wanted or what I was, who I was and how I was trying to navigate it. Because there wasn't really any rule book. There shouldn't be a rule book for any of it. I created my own roadmap. Like I do a lot of like post-op analysis on, how I navigated that with, meeting different biological relatives. Because you're right. Um, it is a disruption for many of them because they did not know, like they've been living a life, I've been living a life. But the question is, for both the adoptee and the, birth or biological parent in those situations is, are you able to still be here and create something? Like, can we create something knowing what we know and not knowing what we don't know? Are we able to still create something here that um, is meaningful? Sometimes it's a no, sometimes it's a not yet, sometimes it's a yes. But I think what I've been able to learn is that's a very important question that it's not an immediate answer, but you can watch and observe over time. And I think adoptive parents have a great vantage point for this because you can actually see if your child ends up going on that journey, knowing your child is really good. Knowing your child and who they are and how they just handle, conflict and all kinds of stuff, it'll give you insight, into how they could potentially navigate something that you just have a lot of unknowns of how that can go, but it doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile.
So it sounds like it would be beneficial to have someone like yourself going through this journey with someone because of the unknown. Just because you want it doesn't mean you're going to get it. And I think you risk, you open your heart like that to try to connect with someone, and it may not be met in the same way. So it's almost like a pushback. You got to be able to get up and go. You went to mom. Mom said no. Do you want to go to dad? Like, so it's really about, hey, what is the end goal here? Let's be realistic. These are adults. You are now an adult. You're going to be engaging with these people as an adult. So the child parent connection may not be the end goal. Maybe it's just we're just friends, right? We're just reconnecting. We don't have to put a label on it. Some people are really weird with labels, and it just creates more mess than needs to exist. So there, I mean, that conversation needs to happen too, right? I'm just throwing this all out there because I think about this all the time because I have an adopted son, and there will come a day where he will ask for more. I've got that folder ready, and I want to be able to share everything with him. And if he decides to go on a journey, let's go. I'm ready for it. Um, I've met all of his bio parents as well. They weren't in the right situations. um they could very well be different people by the time he starts asking questions, and then there's a potential that they are no longer on this earth. I mean, that could cause a quick stop in a hurry. So wow,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, no, I mean but that's good that you're at least in a space to talk about that though, because think about kids who are my age now, adults, that we didn't have these conversations. We never heard our parents have these kinds of conversations at all. But now we ourselves, I'm not a parent yet. I hope I am one day, but I do know other adoptees who are parents, and they talk about this. They talk about the impact of not having these crucial conversations, or at least thinking about it, not with like a disaster, mindset, but just a reality. People are people. These are human beings at the end of the day. And you touched on something that I want to highlight, about assigning roles, to people. I remember assigning roles very early, or, we in the adoption community, we call this thing the ghost kingdom. I didn't term that or anything. So please don't anybody come to me in the comments on this podcast. Um, but it's called the ghost kingdom. And, that fantasy, like how we, imagine people to be, and like the roles of our different, people in our lives, or could be, when that's shattered, potentially what actually happens? Like, do we fall? Do we crumble? Do we just give up? Or is that now information for us to, be informed of how we move now? And I would think that for me, it was information of how to move differently moving forward. Because sometimes you're right. The reality is, the facts are, I'm an adult, you're an adult at this point. Um, and there is not really that child parent dynamic at all, because we never had that. But what can we
Mhm.
ask? I don't know. Like, it takes time to figure that out. But I do know that if you're observing and watching how people are, and you know yourself, it's not wrong to want something, and it's not wrong to want more from those relationships, even if you can't fully define what they are yet. Um, that's a huge lesson that I learned, and I didn't always get it. I didn't, but I'm not mad at the journey though. I'm not mad at going through it and making these connections and learning what I learned about,
Mhm.
my biological relatives and family members, because again, I never had it and now I do. So, that's still a gift that's still powerful to me, and it helps shape me every day, because I have something that bridges the gap in connection to a life that I've lived by my adopted parents, or with my adopted parents, and my adopted family and friends, and all these different people in my community, which I'm, you know, um, very proud of. But also, I have something else that it was always mine. I was born into it. It's my birthright. And yeah, I just think that's a unique experience. That's not
Wow,
easy.
okay. You are an ally, and you're married,
Yes.
correct? How long has it been now?
But we just celebrated our 1 year anniversary last week.
Oh, congratulations.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Time
How
has
does
flown by.
how does this shape how you potentially, maybe this is sometime in the future, years and years in the future, maybe it's around the corner, but how does that shape just internally how you are thinking about potentially becoming a dad?
I think about it all the time. I think about it all the time.
I was
Um,
going to say it's kind of hard not to, since I mean, you're right
yeah,
there. So,
yeah. I mean, I thought about it before, even I got married and before I met my wife, but like I think about it more now because how life is naturally happening for me. So for context, the family that I'm building, the family that I have, they're really great in a time where, as an adoptee, I remember thinking, okay, if I get married, you know, what is that child, if I have a child, going to be born into? Like, how am I going to explain to them who I am, who they're connected to, who their family, who is the family that I'm going to tell them is their family? Um, but thankfully, getting married and the family that I gained, from my wife, and just even looking at certain biological relatives and my adopted parents, I'm starting to see a different picture develop that I did not know was going to exist. Because prior to that, I thought that it was going to be really hard for me. I thought it was going to be really, really hard because I had so many questions and things that I wanted to work out in myself. Um, that I feel like, hindered me a little bit. Well, not hindered, sorry, that's not the right word. But it definitely stalled me initially from just seeking any of that because I just wanted to figure out more of myself. But now I think, okay, all the work that I've done with ancestry, with empowerment, with, creating really good relationships, with my wife, her family, and other different people who make up my family, I'm like, okay, the confidence and the trust in being able to have a child come into that world calms me a whole lot more than if we would have had this conversation like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, because I just wasn't that guy. I really wasn't. Um, so yeah, I'm more at peace with knowing that there's a family that's available for them, and I'm still myself and my amazing, cool, unique self that's going to be their adoptee dad that tells them, my life and who I am. But there's also other aspects of their life that they can connect to without me feeling like I'm not able to show up in the way that I really want to show up for this kid.
so you've got that. Tell me about your family. It's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but it's good though.
Well, only
It
in
is.
the way that it's not traditional, right? Which is not to
Who
say.
asked
I
you
mean,
to?
who's and then that's where I was going. Like, what's traditional anyway? So, all
Not anymore.
right.
There's
So,
nothing
I,
traditional.
well, I mean, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
Did
traditional.
you go down the path of DNA testing? Was that of
Yeah, yeah.
interest to you? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry if I didn't clarify that, but like, so I did, a lot of different ancestry DNA websites, and one of those sites, 23andMe, was actually what helped me make a connection to my biological father's side of the family. Because
Oh,
I
look at
was
that.
on those
Okay.
sites. Yeah, I was on those sites like years ago in college. I got a gift from my parents, I think, and I did that, and but it was kind of
Was that welcoming? Like, yeah, I want to do this, or was like, ooh, like if I start this process, then that means I'm in it.
no, honestly, I always loved genealogy. I had a strong, strong, strong passion for genealogy. Yeah, it was like one of those things I definitely want to do, but I was excited initially to do it. But then when I realized I had roadblocks because I didn't have certain information to kind of fill in the gaps or like, talk to different, fourth cousins and whatever, I was like, okay. That's when I was like, let me just stop because I don't really know where this is going and I don't really know how to tell you, who I am if, I'm adopted and I just don't have that information. But I'm glad we're cousins. Thanks. Yeah, good talk.
No,
So
it's one point on the wall to tie some yarn to.
yeah. But then that's when getting access to those adoption records, that legal part, that system part, that thing that tells the other stuff that I didn't know, helped me put those pieces together.
Okay. So, in on the grand scheme of things, would you say things are better these days when it comes to fostering and adopting than perhaps when you were first introduced to the system?
Mm, it's a loaded
Oh
question.
yeah, we do tough questions here. Yeah.
That's a loaded question, man. And I'm gonna be completely honest and say I can't say it's better or worse. What I can say is it's just different. It's very different. Um,
Okay.
and I say it's different because again, when I was growing up, I'm a '90s kid. Adoption was something that it wasn't hugely prevalent to me. So, like again, being in a same race adoptive family, like nobody really blinked an eye. It wasn't this big thing for us to really talk about and for me to be always put on blast as like I'm the other. I may have felt it sometimes, but it wasn't that. However, now we are at a crux of trying to figure out how to change the narrative when it comes to the different realities of that lived experience as an adoptee, because more people are being vocal, more people are, asking questions and trying to figure out how to help, you know, adoptive parents, adoptees, those who work with that, population, all these different things that it just wasn't as prevalent when I was growing up. So really, I can't say it's better or worse, but I can just say it's very different, and it's just different challenges, different beasts. That, if I'm really honest, I think if we would have had these conversations when I was growing up, at least we would have had some kind of foundation to open the door without it being now really worthwhile and still important. But you see such polarizing views and opinions on a lifelong journey, like it's a lifelong journey as an adoptee and everyone that's connected to that adoptee. Um, but back then, as the '90s kid, I, yeah, it just wasn't the same.
Okay, so let's add a layer of blackness onto it, right? The black community historically, on some topics, right? Very vocal, very out there. This is for me. In some areas, it's a little bit more hush hush. Probably more because it seems unattainable, or it seems like that's a white thing, right? I've in some conversations that I've had with some people on the show, they've identified, hey, adoption has always seemed like it wasn't for us. It was something you did if you had money, or if you had some sort of generational experience, or if it was like a pet project. You see a lot of celebrities, I have adopted all these kids, and it's like, look at all my kids, and it's a whole bunch of show and tell. um and I
Yeah.
think that's a disservice as well. I'm sure they had good intentions, right? And I don't fault them for that, right? They will often adopt kids, mixed race kids, and things like. And there's a lot to be said, yay, pro, nay, all this other stuff. But for what you're doing and the support that you're giving, I know you're not being restrictive, but you are very focused in certain areas and trying to uplift in a certain way. Help me if I've said that wrong.
No, that's accurate. Yeah, yeah. So
So
I
what
guess
why does that
there's
weigh heavy on you? Why have you decided to make that kind of central to what you wanted to focus on, at least in the immediate future?
there's more conversation about it now, and I've learned about this now, more myself in the work that I've been doing. But Black people do adopt. There are Black adoptive parents out there. Speaking to one right now. Um, there's an there's a brilliant, brilliant woman who I'm connected to who has an organization called Yes We Adopt. It speaks to Black adoptive parents. And
Ooh, we have to talk to her.
yeah, you should. She's amazing. Stacey Gatlin, you're watching this. I usually don't do any shout outs like that, but she's like, a great powerhouse and a people person. And yeah, I think a good connection. But anyways, the reason why I'm saying this is because we are there. We are there. But I've also been learning, which I'm sure you've heard about or you've been exposed to at some point, kinship adoption, where that usually is the bucket that we fall more into. Because, as Black people, I even wrote an article about this, the power of us preserving the family, and how historically we were, and we still actually are, I believe, one of the strongest families who, or strongest demographics that, really try to protect, our family members when historically they were trying to separate us. They were separating us. They were breaking us apart. Hello, slavery. We know all of those different things, but we really took a pride in making sure that we could, lay eyes and know where our kin were. And if there was a situation where somebody had a child, out of wedlock, as the term is, and they weren't able to care for that child, well, that child wasn't just going to go to the system. Somebody's grandma, somebody's grandfather, somebody's uncle, aunt, whoever was going to take care of that child and make sure that we could preserve the family.
The
And for
village.
me,
Isn't that where the
the
term
village,
it takes a village?
yeah, it takes a village. And I think that's still a belief that I have, that's still a reality that I see, but it's been challenged by, unfortunately, those of us in the community who have secrecy, who have shame, who, have fragmented truths when it comes to even my situation. I'm an adoptee. I was born out of wedlock, by two teenagers, but one of those teenage partners did not even know he had a child, you know, and so nobody else knew that that child existed. So that opportunity that could have been to preserve the family did not actually happen because someone in that family decided to not share that information. Not judging, but that's the reality.
What a shock that must have been. I mean, and you know
That's
what? Before I let you go on, I always think of someone who is not aware that they've had a child for decades. I often feel like they have missed out because they haven't had the opportunity to decide whether they wanted to have that child in their life or not. Like that decision was not available to them. So now you spend so much time in perhaps a regret mode that you didn't even know existed.
yeah, that's a
It's,
reality.
I mean, there's so
Yeah,
many
no,
corners to all of this.
that's a
It's crazy.
reality.
Anyway,
No, it's a reality, it's a
uh,
possibility, but that's why we have to speak to it because there's products of that. Um, and I don't say any of this with any malice. I don't say any of this with any harm. I say this because, like you asked me, it deserves to be amplified. It deserves to be seen and talked about because there's a real impact. There's a real impact on that. Like I was in reunion with, my family, my black family, people who I was excited to meet, that I would have loved to know, but also had to sit with the reality that none of you knew about me. And, you could have, we were in the same state, but we did not have that experience. Um, Not to wallow in it, but again, to realize how that's also how the system continues to, hurt us in that way potentially. If we aren't in situations where you shared earlier, you know who your, son's biological family members are. And so whenever, however, that journey can manifest on its own time, you have some information about how to potentially connect those dots and help him at that path, which is great. That was not the scenario for me, in a closed adoption. So I try to share this because I think it's important for us to realize that that family still matters, that child still matters, and everyone that's connected to them needs to understand and hear that so we can try, if we can, to support each other and just heal that rift that actually happened, you know?
bring some grace into it. Yeah.
Yeah. But you have to with truth and you have to be honest. Even if it was a decision, even if it was a long time ago, even if you didn't have all the information, we rarely get all the information. But I'm the child of that. And so, I'm here to, speak to that and try to, I believe, be that light, but also I'm going to tell the truth.
So apart from what you're doing today, which you do a lot, of trying to make sure people hear your story, You do a lot of keynotes, engagements, and just kind of communicating to different organizations and communities. Um, how else have you seen this kind of grow in different circles? Let me reframe my question. Oftentimes when we're trying to reach out to the Black community, we go to where the Black community is, and oftentimes it's like a church or something of that nature, community center, things of that nature. It can't be just that, right? Because Black people do everything. But how are we, the royal we, doing when it comes to getting them the right information? Because a lot of Black people will still say, I didn't know I could do that. And is it more like, do you need someone to tell you could do that? Or is it more like you didn't know, so go get it? Like, that's my mentality. I can't put that on everyone, right? But some people do need, that pamphlet that they saw 6 weeks ago to say, oh, I should go back to that because now I can call so and so and ask some questions. So I hope that question made
Yeah.
sense.
No, it does. And I thank you for it because I'm just thinking about my experience again. Um, I didn't know I was gonna, I didn't know I was gonna be led to this. Okay, like let me just preface that. I didn't know. I was trying to heal. I was trying to strengthen myself. I was trying to navigate, confusion and get myself clarity. That's all I really wanted was clarity and a way to be able to, move forward and lead and go after all the things that I feel like, God's wanted me to ever go after. But, those challenges and all those things were just really tough to sometimes navigate. Even though I've always been a high performer and overachiever. But to your question, I think that yeah. People fall in maybe two buckets where they need that self-guidance. They need that, clear resource that says, hey, this is for you to do this. And I want to be a contributor to that. I love resources. I love a guide. I love a framework. I love that stuff. Call me an educator because I am an educator and maybe that's what it comes from. But I also just love learning and being able to teach myself certain things that, without it, I may have not been exposed to it. Um, but also at the same time, there are people who are like me who they have a natural tendency to be a self-starter and just go get something, even if they don't see it in their environment, even if nobody exposed them to it, something happens in them in their life where they're like, yeah, no, it's got to be more than this. I know I can go after and get more than this, and I want to figure out what that actually is. And those people, it's not necessarily a resource. What it is, it's just a space to be. They just need a space to
Mm.
be and get all those types of, sources of creativity, whatever, healing, wellness, excitement, entertainment, whatever it is that just allows them to continue to just, be who they really want to be and not feel limited just because they look left, they look right, and nobody's doing what they're doing.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So okay, so tell me about your speakership. You go out and you talk to um, local communities, schools, businesses, and tell your story as a means to really kind of connect and drive home that hey, if you're in the corner listening and this resonates with you, that's why I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a good start. There's a lot of opportunity to grow, but I'm very grateful for where my story and the work that I do has resonated with different people in different spaces. And, I created a framework called They Are Not Invisible, which speaks to my lived experience, and the young men like me who, it doesn't necessarily mean, that they were an at-risk kid that you know was necessarily in some
But isn't
kind of
that the misconception though, right? That anybody in the
yeah
foster care system is somehow damaged in some way, which I think, that when I hear that, it's like,
yeah
ah,
yeah yeah no you're right
like no
you're
one
right
raises their hand and signs up for the foster care system. You're there for a reason, and it's not necessarily a reason of your own making
Yeah.
99% of the time.
Yeah, and there's a lot of diversity that I've seen in terms of how these dynamics happen, like how these kids are in different makeups and whatnot. It's not always what you think. And no story is the same. But the impact is the same. And so I feel like, in these, talks and opportunities I've had to have conversations, I just share my story, but I also, believe in taking things that are complex that we don't always have an hour conversation for, but turning it into something that's relational and simplified to where you can actually take action once you've been able to, internalize the information, right? Because you don't have to have lived experience to respect a person who does, and you don't have to, compare, your own experiences to honor the weight of what that is for those people. Like me, you just deserve to have a space where we can be there and learn. And like I said, that safety. This is a place to be. This is a place to learn. But also, what do you do next? Well, here you go. And if you want to have more conversations, I invite anyone that I partner with to consulting. I also offer mentoring and coaching services for young men, especially those who are in those transitional periods, from like high school to college or middle school to high school. They deserve, those type of support systems as well. And also just continuing to bring this talk to different spaces because even if it's not, and there's plenty of adoptees and foster care youth all over schools, churches, companies, it doesn't matter. They're there. You may not know that they're there, but they are there. I just think the story hopefully can just help, create that change and spark that, transformation. And I'm very committed to that. I see a responsibility, but I'm also happy that I'm actually at this place where it's not easy to do this work. It takes a lot of self pouring in, but
Yeah,
every time
I
I
can
show up,
imagine.
I do enjoy it.
So you have a Substack. So please tell us what that is, and then also, are you planning on writing a book?
That has been a question. I love to write. I do love to write. And so that Substack was supposed to be my accountability to get back into writing. My old therapist, he he was like, you did a blog like 5 years ago, and you just stopped writing. Like, what happened? Like, that's one of your best, talents. And I'm like, okay, well, let me put some pen to paper and actually be
Well,
accountable.
I'm
So
subscribed, so I'm accountability,
thank you.
right?
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's called the Empowered Self. And please don't, trip up over the title. The title is supposed to, be a way to self-navigate, those different challenges. I talk about my adoption journey. I talk about faith. I talk about, community diversity. I talk about spirituality. I talk about identity, belonging, masculinity, career development, leadership development, all things from the lived experience that I have. And who knows? I think a book would be great, but for now, I'm just trying to continue to write and process and make sure that, that's something that helps move me forward. And if it makes a difference and I can get that voice out to other people, still really want to do that. Um, yeah.
I'm gonna tap you on the shoulder 3 years from now and go, "What's up? What's up with the book? What's going on?"
All right. All right. All right. You heard
I want to see chapter
it.
one. Let me look at
You heard it.
it.
So we got to come back to this
All right.
podcast.
All right. So how can they find you if they want to talk to you? They want to reach out. They want to send you a quick note. Instagram, websites. Maybe you have a pager if you're young enough to know what that is.
Young enough to know, not old enough to have. But
That was clever. I
maybe
like
it's
that.
maybe we, yeah, that's the right one. I'm gonna say, yeah, young enough to know, but not old enough to have. Yeah, cool. But yeah, empowerment by dradam.com. That's my website, and then my Instagram handle empowerment by _Dr. Adam. You can find me there. Those are the two most easily place to find me.
Well, listen, Dr. Adams, I appreciate this time. Again, I think what you are doing, I put myself in that category, just ever so small. I think what we're both doing by amplifying voices. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is to make sure that people hear different opinions, different insights, different perspectives. Yours is very unique because it's from the other side of the wall, right? Being able to say, "This has been my experience. This is potentially." With a lot of the LGBTQ parents that are extending their families through foster or adopt will eventually come back and they may have questions like this. So it's like, be prepared for it. You may not have all the answers. You can't be all the way prepared for it because a lot of us have never done this journey before. But, you know, there's a lot to be said about do we tell, do we not tell, what's old enough, what's young enough, how much do we keep, what do we share? I believe in transparency. Kids pick up and they discern so much at such a young age that we don't even know. And 5 years ago they heard you say something and it's like it's been gnawing at me, mom, for 5 years, or dad, it's been, you said this 4 years ago. I don't know what it meant, but it's been right here. They hear everything. So just be prepared for those conversations and whatever journey that may lead us on. So I am glad that you're doing that work, and I'm excited to see where it ends up.
Thank you, man. Jamil, thank you for the space. I love this conversation. We need this kind of platform. And I appreciate you being open to different perspectives and allowing my lived experience to hopefully help inspire and connect different people like yourself, adopted parents, LGBT adopted parents, those who are considering or desiring. Um, you know, that's the point.
And now you're gonna have triplets. Now that I've said it, I put it
Oh,
out there.
no, you just, no, all of that down. I'm a proud dog dad. No, I'm a proud dog dad right now. He's enough. So thanks. Thank you.
Do it. You can never find somebody do it like me. I'ma turn it all the way up, cause it kamikaze. Go ahead and try, baby, you are gonna see that you'll never ever find somebody do it